I notice things and they make me laugh, and then I usually like store them in the back of my head somewhere, and then they end up on the stage.
I think that there was a point in time where rap was pretty much like non-existent in Ohio.
I actually grew up listening to pop music.
It's the coolest thing in the entire universe.
I love Ohio. I miss it.
Stomach started growling, and he started slowing the way he was walking and taking smaller strides, and you could tell something was definitely not right.
All my stuff has literary elements to it.
We've gotten to such a phase where it's people can just say they're an artist.
You know, wading through a sea of drunks, trying to do the best he can for the band.
Being in a room full of all your best friends, even if you don't know anybody, because you can sing and dance together and just have a really good time.
If you don't know, you don't need to know, man.
Would you like to do a podcast?
Lake Erie or the Cuyahoga River.
You're always gonna make it into something, don't you? You can't just hang out.
People complain that there's nothing to do here, but there is. You just have to go record.
The nursery and all of the trees cross over the dark, and some old parking lots hold my whimpering thoughts, and I'm on the next train. You and me, can't you see what this means? In the light of a torch, realize nothing is forced, nothing is forced.
Hey guys, welcome to Nursery. My name is Lee Boyle.
And I'm Anthony Lamarca.
And today we'll be talking about our usual Ohio stuff. I just want to mention off the top that Nursery is brought to you by the Orange Avocado, 1393 Boardman Canfield Road in Boardman, Ohio. It's a juicery. If anybody's looking for some vitamin C, if you've been sick this season, or maybe some earthier stuff with beets in it, help your blood pressure, or some wheatgrass for just overall health and healing, and some other hippie stuff like that, check out the Orange Avocado. Also brought to you by Timeless Shots Photography, timelessshots.com. They'll do weddings, they'll do family portraits, or your band photo even, something fun like that. The guy's kind of got two sides of his brain as far as he can do your like formal stuff, and he can do fun creative stuff too. And also the Jimmy Fro Indie Music Show, check it out on iTunes and rate and review and listen. He does some fun interviews, a little bit more specific than this podcast, where he talks to people like, I think he talked to the person who runs the grog shop in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Check that episode out and beyond. And be sure to go to thirdclass.net. Check out Virginia's Playlist, the new Third Class record. Soon to be out on vinyl. Right now it's just CD and digital, but you can check out Spotify or Apple Music, order the CD, free shipping. And then bullskit.com for rainy day skits if you're just looking for a bunch of guys who are a little too old to be doing this still, making home movies, goofing around. Bullskit.com. My guest today, Anthony Lamarca, has toured in a couple better known than just the local scene Ohio bands such as St. Vincent and the War on Drugs, but prides himself especially in his work and The Building, which has an album called Reconciliation. Anthony, why don't you start there with The Building and talk to me about what you do in that band?
Well, you know, so that group's just me and my brother, Angelo, and we've, you know, sort of similar to your band, where it's just been like, you know, it just sort of us making music since we were kids, you know,
yeah,
of us,
sure.
like, you know, me and Angelo have had, like, literally every single band I've been in has just been, you know, my first band was me and him, my cousin, and then we had a different band after that, and then like, so The Building is kind of like the new version of just the same thing we've always been doing.
Something that you've always been building upon. Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry.
Uh-huh.
Sorry for that. I'm sorry, but that's cool, man. What would you say for listeners who just came on the scene here and might just be randomly finding us both for the first time? What would your pitch be as far as like, hey, listen to The Building if you're looking for this?
Ooh.
Like this kind of feeling, even you don't have to say it sound like anyone.
Yeah, you know, low energy, sad songs.
Cool. Okay.
You know, I say that half jokingly, but
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Try and make very honest music. Try and make very beautiful music.
That's cool. And the sad song thing, tell me if you agree with this. I've been saying this on a couple of episodes for the 2017 episodes of Nursery. Because me and my buddies do that sad song thing too once in a while. And we think the reason we're compelled to do it, to try to get people to hear that stuff, is because playing somebody a sad song when they're sad is so much better than being like, smile, and like that kind of doing that stuff to them. Like, you don't want to push them so far down in the dumps either, but if you say I understand rather than why aren't you happy, it works better sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, to say like sad songs is just like, they're heavy songs, but I'm not like, hey, I'm gonna write a sad song, you know. It's like, I think I think they're just like you know, honest or real songs, you know, just like writing about things that actually happen in people's lives rather than, you know, like a pop song that's like, oh yeah, dance, have fun, club, drink, or, you know, like stuff like that where it's like, well, yeah, this isn't reflective of most people's lives.
Gotcha.
But I never tried to write hopeless music. So
no, never going out of your way to be like miserable necessarily or any of that stuff.
So
that's good.
I think on the surface, some people will be like, whoa, these guys are pretty dreary. But in reality, it's quite, I think they're pretty hopeful songs.
Sure. And so, you guys do that, and like, that's a cool thing to have around here. And then another thing that you do, well, actually tell listeners, like, if they want to go find the building, is there a good site or anything like that to just go for the building, or a social media platform that you guys prefer before we move on?
Bandcamp.
Okay.
The building/bandcamp.com.
Yeah, thebuilding.bandcamp.com is probably what it is. And then, okay, so another Ohio passion that you have, aside from the building, which seems to be a long-lived thing, even if it wasn't always called that you guys just grew up doing, is you have something that you're working on now with a local recording studio. If Youngstown, Ohioans are listening, and you're maybe a few years older, or maybe you're just around me and Anthony's age. I'm 32. How old are you? 29. Maybe you're younger, but especially older crew, if you listen to podcasts at all, there's a studio called Peppermint Records. Is that right?
Or Peppermint Productions.
Peppermint Productions, cool. And can you give us a little rundown as to what that's all about?
So my relationship with Peppermint is an old studio that started in 1971 that is best known for their polka recordings. And I first went there in high school because I had sort of become aware of this, you know, all these, like, you know, Del Sinchek and all these, like, Grammy award nominated and winning polka artists that have either come through town or from town, you know, and, you know, you always hear about, but you never really, like, go see them play, or, like, you know, you always knew Peppermint existed, but, like, was like, so me and Angela were just like, oh yeah, let's go check out this studio. And we went down there, and it was pretty much exactly what we thought it was, or what we hoped it was going to be, which was like a studio that has kind of been in like a bit of a time capsule for 40 years. But we never ended up recording there until last year, which is where we recorded our last record. And it's just become like kind of an obsession, just because it's such a fascinating world. You know, it's like being a musician in this town. There's obviously, like, you know, your friends' bands are playing and all this stuff, but also there's this whole other world of music, this polka and ethnic, you know, like Eastern European ethnic music that's, you know, was extremely popular in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and also 80s, and is now just kind of like still bubbling under there somewhere, but like, you know, connected through AM radio shows and church pierogi sales and, you know, dances at Kuzmin's. Just like this definite scene that's like kind of hidden
Yeah. And a lot of I assume a lot of people in that scene are some older people too, correct?
Yeah, very much
For sure.
so.
Okay. And so, you mentioned Kuzmin's, just for the bewildered listener. What's that place about?
Kuzmin's is a dance hall.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bar and dance hall, and every Saturday they've got polka bands. I mean, that's another place that I had gone to in high school because I was like, well, we had this tape of Rocky Ciciglia, who's an Italian guitar player, and for whatever reason, me and Angela were like, we gotta go see Rocky Ciciglia. This guy's, because we're Italian, he's Italian. We gotta go check out this old Dago playing guitar. He's got a MIDI set up or whatever. Just like you're listening to this junky cassette he made. Rest in peace, Rocky. So my mom was like, well, if you're into Rocky Ciciglia or you want to go see him, you also got to go see Del Sinchek because he's a legend,
Mm-hmm.
So we looked up and Del Sinchek was playing at Kuzmin, so we went there. And, you walk into this place and like Peppermint, it's another kind of time capsule where it's like there's a polka band playing on a red carpeted stage and drinks are $1.25 and there's hot dogs and a bunch of 80-year-old people looking at you like, what the hell is this kid doing here? Like, maybe they just came here to drink or something, like but we're sitting there watching the band play and people keep coming up to us like, what are you guys doing here? Come on, you got to dance, you can't just sit there. So, which is awesome because, next thing you know, you're dancing and that's what it's all about when you go to hear some polka music.
Well, that's cool. So you haven't ever stepped too far out of being able to just be a fan and dance to another band's music. With what you've done with your life as far as doing music yourself, it's nice to know that you can just let loose somewhere else in a place that you obviously come off as somewhat foreign and still have a good time.
Yeah, and that's sort of like, I guess, kind of the cool thing about all of like the polka stuff is that there's so many parallels of that scene to like what we're all trying to do. It's like, these places, obviously at one point they had more money, or at least were more ambitious, in which they like built legit studios. But other than that, it's like very DIY of just like, yeah, we're gonna start our own label and put out our own records and we'll burn the CDs and do everything any way we can to just like get stuff out. And
nice.
But yeah, it's sort of fascinating to just sort of see it, to just sort of approach this other type of music that I wouldn't otherwise really be like, oh yeah, let me go listen to this.
Yeah.
It's just like to appreciate something. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like not necessarily from the standpoint of like, I love this music, but I love what this music represents culturally.
Sure. And so you and a handful of other people near your age are bridging this small gap between that scene and what you are kind of referring to as your own scene with people like me and other friends around, and maybe someone I've mentioned once or twice because they had engineered our album, Historian Recording Company. I have noticed you around there when they have sessions at their house. So bridging, going from the polka to now what is our scene, what do you think, like how much fun do you have with the whatever rock scene in Youngstown or whatever you want to call it? Like, do you enjoy as a fan and a player in that scene the same way you enjoy the polka? You mentioned that there was a cultural relevance that makes you like the polka even more than the aesthetic. Now, is it kind of reversed when you're in the scene that has to do with like pop and rock? Is it more like, hey, this aesthetic is actually more just like appealing at first to the ear and the culture comes second? Since you're more immersed and not as outside?
Yeah. I feel like, usually, like if there's, obviously it's like, oh yeah, like this is a great band and I like love these songs. But usually stuff I really like, I usually relate to sort of on that same cultural, not necessarily cultural level, but like just like there's a certain, like, guys in a polka band are singing about what guys in polka bands sing about. Like, it's something I've learned about collecting polka records is like no one ever tried to necessarily like elevate that art form. You know, there were no Beatles of polka yet.
Gotcha.
Yet. But you know, it's like they're, I guess, just sort of like the honesty of that music where it's just like, yeah, like we're doing this thing because this is our heritage and it's, you know, part of this thing. Whereas someone, you know, like, you know, I think it's just the thing of like having to, like, you have to believe the songwriter, whoever it is, and however they're presenting, whatever they're, you know, like any genre of music, it's like you need to, like, I need to believe what you're saying in order for me to want to listen to it. Because if not, I don't know, for me at least, I usually lose interest pretty quick.
Okay, so and you're saying that that's just across the board for whatever genre. So there's more versatility in like the modern rock scene in Youngstown, but there's kind of a familial and sincerity type thing that you look for wherever you're looking in music, correct?
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know, I feel like sometimes I also fall into or I don't know, like sometimes I think you kind of fall into a trap where it's like you like music of people you know. You know, like if you know someone, I think you're 90% more likely to love their music.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you know what? I want to give a shout out to David Pokrivnak, who kind of suggested that I ask you for an interview, and thanks for obliging, by the way. And he's one of my favorite, Under Bitter Alms. His art, I mean, that is like my number one favorite studio recording artist in Youngstown, you know. And I'm sure it'd be a little different if I didn't know the guy. So just to give an example of my own, like, and I love the stuff, man. I love that music.
If I didn't know him, I would never.
Oh, I would hate it. No, but it's funny. It makes me like it more because he always leaves kind of this. He kind of leaves this ambiguity, especially in that kind of music. That's and if listeners don't know, it's just like very soundscapey type stuff that's very like meditation based. And I mean, I've always liked music like that, and I'm pretty confident that if I hadn't met him and someone had turned me on to it, I'd still have it in my little playlist somewhere. But yeah, knowing him, it definitely adds something to it, and I'm not one to feign formalism, you know, when it comes to music. Like, I'll take it all, man. Give me the documentaries, give me everything. The only thing that's ever ruined anything for me is maybe once or twice if I like am right in front of the lyricist and they maybe start talking too much about what the song's about, I'll kind of maybe put the brakes on and be like, I get it, but don't ruin it for what it's about for me. You know, that's the only time I ever feel like I'm going too far into learning about the song. And I don't mean to be precious about it, but like once or twice I have like not wanted to know what a song is about because I was like, I made it my thing though. I don't want you to make it another thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's funny. So then the times that you do kind of, then you take off and you go on tour with a couple larger acts and stuff like that. How do you feel on that circuit as opposed to then all of a sudden slipping back into Youngstown and going to a bar and seeing polka? Is it like, are you like, am I living the same life here? Or are these two different, you know, like how's that hit you? Like one right after the other?
I mean, so yeah, for me, it's like, I mean, I love it. It's like, you know, you go out and you're living in a fantasy world where you're playing, I mean, not fantasy world, like, you know, I'm actually out there playing, but you know, it's not my music that I'm playing. So it's like, but I don't know, like after I lived in New York before moving back here and like New York now is, I think, a very uninteresting place to live. And I mean, I'm sure that most people are like rolling their eyes out of their heads. It's like someone being like, okay, here's like the world's biggest fucking hipster being like, I live in Youngstown, Ohio, and New York is so boring.
New York is so over.
Yeah, it's like, but it's like, it's not a great place for a musician to live at all, and it hasn't been for years because it's terribly expensive and clubs need to make money in order to keep their doors open. So they think about that when they're booking bands. And yeah, there's a handful of places that are doing cool shows, but it's just a handful of places, and there's thousands of bands all trying to play the same place. And, it's like you have your crew of friends, but, it's like I had 2 friends when I lived in New York that were from New York. Like my one buddy John, who engineered all of our stuff while we recorded, that I've recorded in New York. Like he lived in my neighborhood and he went to high school in that neighborhood. And it was like, other than that, everyone else was from everywhere else.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like there's this shared experience of, like we're all musicians doing our thing in New York, and that's awesome and it's great. And there's 1,000 shows to see, and it's inspiring to like, someone calls you at midnight being like, hey, let's go to this show. And you'll be like, oh yeah, why not? Like, where's that? Like,
sure,
would never happen here.
That's fun. Yeah.
But for me, I was never comfortable being like, I'm a musician from New York.
Right.
Like, that's, to me, being a musician from New York is a very boring tag to have. Like,
yeah, sure, an oversaturated sounding tag.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, there was this great article in I forget if it was the Washington Post or some other, maybe it was the Washington City, I don't know. But I also forget the person who wrote it, so this is very enlightening. But it was all about regionalism, and this person, essentially the article, it came out, like 5 years ago or whatever, but their argument was like, everything is Brooklyn. Philly is Brooklyn. Portland is Brooklyn. Seattle, like every city is Brooklyn. Like what we've perceived to be the subculture, the underground, is now just cookie. It's like it's as cookie cutter as the regular mainstream American culture. The cool neighborhood of every city is becoming indistinguishable from the cool neighborhood of every city.
Sure. Okay.
And and essentially the argument was like that's detrimental to creative music and to just having like essentially just saying like the importance of regional character in what you do creatively. And that's something that really resonated with me because, even while I was in New York, everything that me and Angela were writing was still always about Youngstown or our own personal experience. But, it was like the building or the Caledonia Mission or whatever we called it was always, to me, a Youngstown band, not a New York band, even though we were living there.
And you know what? To me, from what little interaction I had with you guys, like it was a Youngstown band in my eyes as well, in my ears as well. And that's a cool thing. Here's a weird question: do you think you would have written as much about Youngstown had you been there the whole time?
I'd say I think so.
Yeah. The only reason I ask that is because me and the guys in my band have had this little itch to scratch about the Pacific Northwest. I don't know why we can't get off of it, but just here and there we write a few songs about it, and then and I'm always like, are we writing it because we just got a taste, and we're writing it because we're gone from it, and now we're thinking about it because we just visited a couple times, play a couple shows there, and do a couple jobs there, but we'd never been there long. And it's like I've written quite a bit about Ohio, and probably I assume how you mean this too. It's not that I said the word Ohio a bunch in all the songs or any of that stuff, but they're of course about this area and about some of the landscape or the emotional landscape or whatever you want to say. But did you guys get some outside perspective that made Ohio beautiful?
Yeah, probably. I guess I never thought about it, but yeah, I don't, yeah, I mean, I'm sure living anywhere, leaving, obviously, I mean, you interact with people around here all the time, and there's people in my family who are like, there's a lot of people in this town that have never left this town, or have never lived
go to the next county sometimes, Yeah.
And actually, that was kind of a fascinating thing. Our first landlord in New York, it was this old Italian couple, and you could tell that these two ladies hardly left their neighborhood. And it's just like, wow, you live in New York City, and like you're just kind of not interested. It's like, there's a lot of stuff happening there in Manhattan. Nah, we're good. We'll stay in Gravesend. We got a bakery. We got, the pork store. We're fine. It's like, okay.
It's funny. You think like you're in New York, so you don't think that same old thing's going on that's happening here. People in Columbiana are like, I don't go to Boardman. There's too many. Well, they don't have that accent. I'm gonna do it though. I don't go to Boardman. There's too many people there. I don't like going to Southern Park Mall. It's crowded. And you're like, that's like 8 minutes from you.
Yeah.
Have you not just gone there by accident? I've gone to Cleveland by accident. Like I've gone,
Yeah,
it's
totally.
Like, it's like, I agree with you that they, in my mind, they need to have done it a couple of times, live a little as far as travel goes, miss your home a little if for no other reason. But it doesn't sound like you fled to New York because you're like, I'm getting out of this place or any of that either. So it's a little different for you.
Yeah. I mean, I moved to New York because it was like, well, I'm going to go to music school. And, that seems like I should go to New York as a musician.
Sure.
Which was a good decision and very helpful in a lot of ways. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what my relationship with this area would be if I had never done that. I'm sure, it could have spiraled the other way where you sort of gain a resentment towards being from here and kind of hate it, which, you see a lot of.
It happens a lot here.
So, I don't know. But that's not, I don't know. There's nothing too useful about that kind of attitude.
No. I'm guessing you wouldn't have like just started completely resenting this area, but maybe you got some perspective by being outside of it a little bit, is all. But so the reoccurring theme for 2017 for Nursery has been confidence. I like to ask the guests what their confidence has been as compared to like when they were younger. Like say like you were a kid and you're a creative guy and you struggled with confidence and now you're over it, or maybe you were one of those awesome kids that was like, look at me, and everyone loved you, and now you're kind of like a bit more like, oh God, what am I doing? Don't look at me. Like, so like talk to me about your your general life and where what direction your confidence has gone through that life.
Confidence.
Just your general confidence, about anything.
I mean, some of my earliest memories are like putting on John Mellencamp, that album, that CD, which I still have the same copy of that CD, and putting that in the CD player and forcing my mom to videotape me shirtless while I like danced around with a white plastic guitar singing. So confidence, I would say, was like all-time high when I was like
never
5.
achieved again.
Yeah, just like demanding my mom to videotape me because I wanted to be John Mellencamp. And I'd say that confidence had stayed pretty good, and then like you hit your teenage years and like you start to like hate being videotaped or photographed. But I was always, musically I was always very confident because I was, and I'm going to sound like a complete dick, but like I was always very good. So like being a really good drummer when you're like 10 or 12, it's like my first band I was 12 and it was like we were playing gigs. Like
Yeah,
you know, bunch of
That's
old
rare.
drunk dudes coming up to be like, "Oh my God, dude, you sound like John Bonham. Oh my God, you're amazing." You know, it's like, you know, it's sound great. I guess I've always had like confidence in my ability, and I think as I matured, that confidence became just like realizing what I'm actually good at, like realizing I'm not the best musician in the world, but like knowing what things I'm very good at and what things I'm not good at, and knowing when to do what you're good at, you know?
Yeah, sure.
But I feel like one of the things that I've kept from those young years that sort of keeps me active in terms of like doing creative things is that sort of naive idea that you have when you're a kid of like, I made a record and like I'm going to be famous. Like this is the best record ever recorded. You know, it's like I actually believe that with everything I record. I'm like, someone should call Brian Wilson and let him know that I just made the greatest record ever made. You know, and like, and obviously, you know, you've never done that, but like,
well,
I think that like having that stupidity keeps you dumb enough to like be like, oh yeah, let's go record another record. Like, you know, like surely more than 10 people will buy this record.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like, you know, and it's great because I think if I didn't have that, you would maybe stop pursuing your own creative things that, you know, which I really love doing, which obviously, you know, they're not very successful, but it doesn't matter because the next one's going to be really successful.
Right. Well, when things do poke into some sort of stratosphere of mainstream media, whatever way that is, like, not to harp on this because this isn't really what this podcast is for, but like when there was that little beef war between, for one moment there in Pitchfork, between Sun Kill Moon and the band you tour with, the War on Drugs and all that stuff, and like he's from Massillon, Ohio, so it's like fun to be like, whoa, they're treating this like even though it's Pitchfork and it's still kind of a sideline to the to what's going on in pop culture, it's fun to be like, guy from Massillon, Ohio, versus like this indie pop band is like, this is like rapper beef. It's important to like, it's on one hand you're like, this is great, this is fun, it's like healthy competition and weird pop coverage, but on the other hand you kind of slip down under again into the real Ohio, into these small projects that we see like at Historian and stuff, where you're like, yeah, there's 20 people here, they're the exact right 20 people to just sponge all this stuff in, and like, so like, there's kind of, I always fall between that wanting to sell more than 10 records, as you put it, or you know, like sell more than a few and be somewhere hiding, popping into the stratosphere, to the kind of like, New York ain't nothing, this is Ohio thing, you know, like I walk that line a lot, and I think a lot of Ohioans who are somewhat positive about this state they kind of walk that exact line where they're like excited if the Browns are doing something, but they're also like, I'm going to my own place, this is my bar, we don't need anything, we got a little shop, we got and they turn into your landlord, you know, like where they like don't even want the public eye on them at all, they got everything they need right here within a few feet of each other, you know. And so it's a fun line to walk, but it's nice to hear that you didn't, I thought just because you're a musician that you'd have this big story of confidence wavered somewhere. And it's nice to know that didn't happen to you. That's a rare case.
Well, that's totally not true. I mean, my confidence wavers.
But it sounds like the trajectory, like that whatever, even if it's fake confidence, the thing you need to like keep making the record for the building, say, or for whatever, like that, you know, at least to instill it into yourself at certain intervals, that you're not so down and out that you don't make a record.
Yeah.
But I get it. I'm generalizing a bit. I'm sure you've had moments
yeah, totally.
where you've wavered. But it was nice to hear that you were kind of like, hey, man, I like this music a lot, and nothing's going to stop me from making it. And so that's good to hear.
Yeah. I mean, because at the very least, then it's just like, even if no one ever pays attention to your music, it's more interesting to have a pile of music that you recorded that no one's heard, and you're just like this weird old gripper who lives in Youngstown when you're 70, and people are like, yeah, dude, you ever listen to any of that dude's recordings? You know, like, hey, you know.
And a couple people just get like this huge world out of it.
Yeah, you know, like, that's more interesting than just like being the dude that's like, yeah, I used to play, you know.
Oh, that is the worst. I hate that stuff. Like
Yeah.
the dude that's like, I was in a band.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to be mean to anyone listening. Some people just quit music and do other things, and Godspeed. But there's always that dude who's like, I play guitar in this band. I'm like, I don't care, man. If you're not doing it now, I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, it's like there's nothing wrong with like not playing music if
Right.
you had done it before, but like when it is presented to someone who is playing music with like kind of like a hidden air of regret of like sort of like, you know, sometimes you'll meet those dudes who are just like, yeah, I used to do all that. It's like there's kind of this attitude of like, yeah, you'll see, you'll hit the wall at some point,
dude.
It's like,
There's
why-
those guys. Those guys do that. Like, I had a neighbor like that. He'd always take my instruments off me and play them. They always do that. They always like do that thing where they come up and solo you out of your comfort zone while you're trying to play a show. You know, not always, but like I've known like an uncle or a friend or a dude who like is way better aesthetic musician than I am, but doesn't write.
Mm-hmm.
They come up and they solo you out of your, you know, they just something in them has always wanted it, and they quit, and they shouldn't have.
Mhm.
And the reason they quit is because they thought it would be such an undertaking to just play. And like the building, I get the sense that you guys don't feel an obligation, and that you play when you want, and that's what might sustain the project. Is that am I hitting home on any of this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think me and Angelo being brothers, you know, like there's like zero chance of us getting in any sort of like argument that we can't get through. You know, like the things that would break up a band. You know, it's like you can't really break up. I mean, obviously people do not talk to their brothers, but like, you know, like it's something where it's just like, yeah, we're always going to be doing this no matter what. And you know, for me, it's also my livelihood of like playing in other bands too. So it's like, well, yeah, I mean, like it's just kind of a natural thing of what I do, and whether or not it's successful is not whether I, you know, like I don't put the sort of the worth of my creative energy in whether or not it's successful. You know, it's more about, was I able to put this idea that I had into a set of songs or into some sort of music, and did I do it in the way that I wanted to do it? You know, and also each time it's like, oh, what did I learn about this process, and how did the process change? You know, like when we did our first album as The Building, you know, I recorded everything on my own. I mean, doing the engineering of it all, you know, like, and recorded it all at home. And the process of doing that made me want to not record anything on this new record. This is why, you know, doing it at Peppermint was a big thing. Not only just sort of like because I wanted to record something there, but also just I didn't want to be sitting at home with my laptop trying to make a great sounding record.
Yeah.
Not that people can't do that.
Sure.
Obviously people can do that. But just for me, I realized that I'm not like, I don't have the gear at home to like do what I want to do, and I wasn't interested in like, I just wasn't interested in doing that again.
Yeah,
because
that makes sense.
I knew if I'm starting a project like that where I'm gonna do everything at home, the willpower it takes to put restrictions on yourself. I don't have that. You know, like I'll want to like double track everything and just like put too much on it.
Okay.
And maybe I could, you know, go back and not be able to do that now that I like realize some self-restraint. But just at the time, like, you know, I guess, you know, it's just like about learning every time you're doing a record and how you want to change stuff or how you want to push yourself to make something that sounds different or, you know, new in some way or something.
Sure. And that kind of is in regards to what struck a chord with me is when you talked kind of, you seem to refer to someone kind of finding it later after you die. Did you say after you die? You just said something about someone finding like an old album of whoever and being like, this is pretty good, man. Like to me, like it's all about that. It's not, I don't give a crap if they remember my name or any legacy or any of that, but it's all about like, did it make their day better to hear the song? Great. Mission accomplished. You know, like that's the best part is that like you may have made their mood a little better. Maybe you didn't like solve some big problem for them, but for a second there, maybe they cried in their car. Maybe they just smiled a little or tapped their foot, but something happened that made their life better because you wrote a song. You know, like, and to me, that's the fun in it, is that you're going through this learning process to better yourself every time you're doing it. And that could really unfold for someone, even if it is only 10 people that get it. And like that, I mean, to me, that's the biggest deal in the whole world, no matter big or small. And so it's nice to know that like throughout each process, you've kind of been diligent in knowing what to improve and stuff like that. And knowing that you're like, I'm going to try it with this way. I'm going to try it with that. I'm going to have just enough confidence to keep trying it and do it over and over again. And so it's a good thing. So to wrap us up, listeners who are interested, Ohioans or anyone else who maybe stumbled upon this, and hopefully you're having a good time listening to us. We appreciate you listening and just giving us a chance. They can go to thebuilding.bandcamp.com to hear the music we're referring to. And you can also check out, I believe, is it peppermintproductions.com? Is it that simple? Or where's Peppermint Productions at?
Peppermint, well, there is peppermintrecords.com.
Okay.
Which is a time portal to 1992.
Yes, I've seen that website.
It's like a historical landmark for the internet.
Yeah, it's got like just big buttons that are like written in like italic and
everything's
stuff.
Blue. So much blue font.
Blue, like, yeah. So there is that if you guys just want to look at some 90s website stuff.
Yeah, and then me and Dave and Dean are going to start putting stuff up on peppermintproductions.bandcamp.com. We're going to start putting the Peppermint catalog up online for people to listen to. And
good. Okay, guys.
So bring that into the world.
So check that out. Young listeners, if you know who he's referring to, David Prokrivnak has an album out called Alms. He's in his own musical project, Bitter Alms. Also, he did a photograph book about Youngstown that my guest Anthony wrote the foreword to. It's kind of a rare book to get your hands on, but do look up David Prokrivnak online and see if you can find that. It's a good thing. It's a nice little photographic documentation of Youngstown. And then he also mentioned Dean Anschutz. He's a drummer from Red, White, and Blue, among other projects. And so these three guys, if you dig what they do, you might dig the attitude that they put over their what should I call it, re-emerging of the archive of Peppermint's back catalog and beyond, right? So that's a fun project for you guys. So listeners, again, it'll be peppermintproductions.bandcamp.com, correct? Yeah. Or thebuilding.bandcamp.com. And of course, same old thirdclass.net or bullskit.com for just like music and comedy. And can you say, look, Mom, we're on a podcast?
Look, Mom, we're on a podcast.
Hey, thanks for being here, Anthony, and everyone. Thanks for listening.